Do you actually understand the amount of effort it takes to build a sophisticated appointment booking system for your voice agents? If you don't, you definitely should check out the video I made previously that tells you exactly on all of the things that you actually need so that you can get you or your client from an uninformed optimism to an informed pessimism, as a voice solution is most likely not as easy as you think it is. In this previous video, I explain you everything you need to understand how this simple uninformed optimism that is represented as solution 1 is actually turned into an informed pessimism, which is like the complete solution that we have used inside of our agency to make appointment bookings alone. As you can see alone from these two solutions, there is a massive difference between the features and the things that we actually take care of to make sure things work smoothly and you can actually use that solution within your voice AI. And in case you watched it already and you are still here, welcome back. This video is basically a result of your amazing feedback on my previous video, which goes even deeper into voice AI and booking systems so that you can build solutions that are better than anything else that is out there on the market. I got really awesome questions both in the comments and in my community on additional features such as email confirmations or cancellations or rescheduling that I decided to make an addition to the previous video where I'm explaining a couple of more details so that I can help you, hopefully, to build a better solution for yourself, for your agency, or for your offerings. Now, to actually get started, let's head right over to my screen again. And you can see right now the solution 5, which is the one that we have seen as the last sophisticated booking solution from my previous video. And just to quickly run you over the whole concept, in case you forgot it, it is very basic. We basically have a caller, we have a voice orchestration layer, which in our case is Vapi, because like I mentioned, Vapi is literally the go-to platform for building something as sophisticated as this. With other platform, it might be possible, even though it is a lot harder because you often need to rely on their predefined features that you cannot just customize as simple as you can do it with Vapi. Now, the main concept here is that we have one specific feature that is a tool call that can handle bookings. This is kind of like the whole concept behind, right? This solution only focuses on bookings. And it takes in consideration a lot of things like time zone matching, buffer times, holidays, predefined dates that can be asked if the customer wants to book an appointment right now in this moment. All of those kind of cases often occur during a conversation with a user, which is why we covered them here to provide you with a really and sophisticated booking solution. Now, if you remember the solution 6, which we see right here, we had a couple of extra things added, like multi-agent calendars, which is a pretty complex thing that usually comes on top, especially if you work with agencies that have a lot of agents or employees that the calendars need to be connected at the same time, and then you need to use something like round robin to loop through them and find and assign meetings based on availability and to kind of like evenly spread them out. There's also the API differences. We basically explained all of that, but these two specific points here is what we are going to look into today, which is SMS and email confirmation and cancellation. Why only 2 points? Because trust me, these 2 points alone will be really, really complex by itself because there are a lot of extra features that go in. And if you enjoy that kind of content, I would really appreciate if you drop me a message below in the comments and tell me what you would like to see, because I'm definitely happy to just extend this graph or this diagram to make it more full, more complete, so that you have a solution that you can use as a reference for building your very own appointment booking systems. Now, to get started, we start with the most complex one, which is the cancellation part. Now, all of that what we saw in solution 5 is literally just for booking appointments. It cannot cancel anything, it cannot reschedule anything, it can book appointments, it can offer alternative times, etc. But that's the whole purpose of that. Now, if we want to enrich that with a cancellation system, we need to have a couple of extra things that are incredibly important for us to be able to actually make that work. As you can imagine, with a single booking call, you can do everything on the same call with the user, right? You can offer alternative times, etc. But for cancellation, you need to have some kind of memory that he can access in any kind of call that might appear after the user already booked. And this is why we need to implement a certain tracking solution of keeping track of that customer, which usually is a database, might be in the form of a CRM or a custom database. And this is where solution 7 comes in. So as you can see now, it already gets a bit bigger. So I even need to zoom out a bit because this is what we are currently covering. To just go over the considerations and the features. Obviously, the first thing is that the caller can cancel an appointment. And if we look over here, that means for considerations, we need to cancel appointments and that the UserDB appointments are managed by a third-party service. So in that case, we would probably connect to a pre-existing database that is offered by the client that we're building this voice AI solution for. So imagine that they already have something in place that we can use to hook up on to just manage those appointments on their platform. This can be a CRM, and in more of cases it is a CRM, sometimes even an Airtable or a Google Sheet in smaller cases. But just understand that there is already something existing that we can leverage to make sure we can access user information even during the call based on previous calls. So we need information like what appointment has the user actually booked, at which time, is it still active, etc. And also why we have a custom user DB in the first place. I'm gonna explain you all of that right within this flow. Now, if we look over, everything that is white is basically what we have already previously defined inside of our solution 5, it was, right, in the main solution. This is all booking process, and everything in purple is what we have newly added to this whole solution. Now, as you can see down here, we have the user database, which is probably the most important one. If we are considering this, and this means they are synced with an external service, meaning that there is already something in place that we can access to, so we don't need to recreate the whole logic by ourselves, we would look at a table that has something like this: a phone number, maybe a first name, the appointment timestamp, which is like the appointment that the user actually booked for. And this is also another thing. In that case, we save it as Zulu time, so we have it always in the technical approach. But you might also want to save that in a different kind of time zone depending on where your company is. And this also depends on your CRM, the software that you're using behind it, and probably if you deal with multiple time zones in the first place. And lastly, we have another field called booking status. This one isn't fully necessary in a lot of cases, even though I always prefer it, because for us, tracking things is a lot better and a lot easier. And in some way, you could also manage that with appointment timestamps. But for the sake of this video and for making it easier to understand for you, we have a separate column called booking status. Now, if we talk about external services, meaning that we expect that we would have all of those fields available, and we would also expect that the external service manages the appointment timestamps, meaning that whenever something has been booked inside of our solution, let's say right here via, let's say, Calendly or a Google Calendar or whatever calendar is basically connected to it, that this calendar is able to actually create its very own booking in this custom table and update it here and set the booking status respectively. Now, with that said, that's very important to understand, because this is how a lot of systems are set up already with people that track their appointments. So they already have a similar setup, might be named differently, but the core concept is kind of the same, and all of that is saved in a user database. So a couple of changes up here to the flow itself, right? Now, we don't only have a single tool call, but we have two tool calls. We have the one for booking tools and for a cancellation tool that can cancel the appointments. Then down here, I also mentioned use reasoning to choose the right one. That is usually an LLM task. So whatever kind of LLM you use in the backend, might be OpenAI, right? You want to prompt engineer the prompt properly so that it can actually use reasoning based on certain tasks or whatever you define in the prompt to choose the right tool at the right time. That's important to understand, because if you don't define that inside of your prompt, the AI will basically never understand when to choose a tool and when not. So that is something you need to take care of with prompt engineering. Now, the booking tool we ignore because there's literally nothing new here except of this part. So we have added a new module up here for tool call responses, because now since we're dealing with multiple tool calls, we just usually centralize the setup, meaning that we use one kind of response module that sends all of the information back to the voice AI orchestration layer, so in that case Vapi. And this is always the same kind of format, it just has different information within it. So we like to prepare it in a centralized way. Now, with that out of the way, if we go down here to the cancellation tool, let's say the user wants to cancel the appointment, right? In that case, the AI basically determines, the user would like to cancel an appointment. Here's what's going to happen. It will basically try to cancel an appointment. It doesn't send any kind of parameters, because all the user says is it would like to cancel the appointment. So we would expect it is one appointment that the user has booked on the calendar that we can cancel. Now, it basically goes to the next step, and this is where the important stuff happens. We basically identify the caller and we filter for some certain properties, and those properties are the date and obviously the status. So what we do is we basically check in the user database based on the phone number, which is our unique identifier in that case, whether or not there is actually an appointment timestamp that is in the future. So it's not happening right now, but it's in the future, and it has the booking status set to active and not already canceled. If that is the case, and if there was an appointment found, then we go with the appointment cancellation process, and we would basically cancel the appointment. We will do this by updating the user database. So in that case, you would basically cancel it by setting the status to cancelled, right? This is all you need to do for canceling the appointment in the database. And maybe, as mentioned here, informing an external service. That can be Calendly, that can be Google Calendar, wherever you have this appointment set up. And once you've done that, all we do is we prepare a response that is then sent back to Vapi in the tool call response that the appointment was cancelled. So this is important so that the AI can use the answer inside of the conversation to tell the user whether or not the appointment was cancelled or not. Now, usually it can be cancelled. The only things that happen might be that you want to build in some error handling, but we come to that part a little bit later as well. Now, let's for example say we don't find any existing appointment, which also could be the case. Let's for example say the user tries to cancel the appointment, but then hangs up because of something and then calls again and says, oh yeah, I want to make sure my appointment is cancelled. In that case, it might already be cancelled, and we would then just check and probably don't find any kind of appointment. And in that case, we would have a separate message that we send back to the tool call that says user has no active appointments. So then the AI can say something like, thanks for reaching out. We don't find any active appointment for yours. It might have been already canceled. So that is something you can prefer in the response that you send back within the tool call to Vapi. And as you can see, this whole solution right here is already a lot more sophisticated than the booking alone, because this part is literally for the booking, and this whole new logic is only introduced for the cancellation, because the major difference for making this work is that we need to do state management, and obviously we need to track out the customer so we can refer to existing calls and meetings that they have booked prior to the call that they're currently having. Now, even though this solution works, it is not the optimal solution. There are a lot of more steps that can go in and that are important, especially if it comes to booking. Which brings us to solution number 8. So if we scroll over here, we need to zoom out even more to just show this whole thing because it's getting bigger and bigger. But again, all of the purpose steps are the new additions that we added to it. And as you can see right here, all of those are now basically added to the actual booking tool and not even to the cancellation tool. And why is that? I'm gonna dive with you into that right now. But before, let's look over the considerations right here, because those are the features, or let's say the changes that we need to look into. Number 1 is obviously create and update a caller. So what we have done in the previous one, we might have been able to update the status. But what, for example, if you want to book an appointment and the user isn't even there? What if the external service doesn't create the user in the database? So let's assume you have maybe a custom solution, or you have Calendly, but Calendly doesn't synchronize the stuff with that user database that you previously had set up, because we were expecting that there is an external service like Calendly maybe, or Make.com, or any kind of automation that updates that user database for you based on the meetings that have been booked into a calendar, right? This has not been the case so far, which is why this is considered a separate task. We basically need to, in this solution, solution 8, we are basically the ones handling all of the data inside of the table, which might not solely be the case that it's only us, that also external services can interact with it, but we actually take responsibility of creating a user in case there doesn't exist one while we make a booking. Because that is important, obviously, if we want to track whether or not the user booked something, if he previously already created a meeting through the API or through the voice caller. And we also have another point here, which is user can book multiple times but cancel only one, which is right. What we've built previously is that a user can basically call multiple times and he would still be able to book and book over and over again, and therefore has multiple meetings in the calendar, even though he might only want to have a single one. But there was just no possibility of canceling an appointment, right? Or not even rescheduling, which is a whole nother task for another time. But let's just imagine that for now, the issue is that the user can still book multiple appointments. As in this example, we would only like to have one appointment that can be canceled and booked at a time. If we go to the features, it means that we want to prevent multiple bookings, and we obviously want to link the user with the caller with a user DB that we create, or that we have in place, as you can see down here, for managing all of the callers and their appointments. Now, if we look over this whole thing down here now, we said that I basically mentioned that meetings are sensed via the voice AI itself. So the solution, or whatever automation we built, basically has the potential of synchronizing that user table with the new bookings from that user made a booking through the voice AI. So to follow along this flow and show you actually the latest steps, we just start over here where the user just asks, I would like to, okay, in that case, it might be better the booking appointment. Then Vapi would basically determine the tool call. It says, okay, booking tool, awesome. So we go in here, and in the appointment booking tool, as you can see, we basically go again with date, time, phone number, time zone. We do some validation stuff right over here. And while validating the data, we do another step right before checking availability, which is checking if there are any existing bookings. And how we do that is very simple. We basically retrieve the caller by the phone number, because that is a unique identifier, as you can imagine, right? In our table. We basically check whether or not there's already a user existent inside of our database that has this phone number. And if we actually find an existing booking based on the phone ID, we just respond back to the tool call with that there's already an active booking available. We might be even able to add the time if you want that, or you can literally just send back a static message like that to the tool call response, so the AI can tell the user, yeah, sorry, you cannot you cannot book a new one because you already have an existing one in place, right? This is the whole purpose of informing the user prior a new booking that there is already an existing booking in place. Now, obviously, this brings a couple of more issues with it, right? So the user would need to cancel it, which he can do on the same call. He could, for example, say, yeah, I'd like to cancel the booking. Then it would run through the cancellation flow. And then he could start again with his normal booking setup, with a normal booking flow, and it would probably work as well. But keep in mind that it would again check whether or not there's an existing booking or not. And this existing booking, how this would look like is that we would usually look in the user database whether or not, number one, the user actually exists in the database. Number two, he has an appointment added to the appointment timestamp and it is set to status active. And we also want to make sure that the appointment that is added to it is in the future and not in the past, right? Because obviously if it's in the past and it is still active, there's just a missync between the actual booking and how you should manage the status of those appointments. That's another task that we go into in a bit as well. Now, let's say, for example, there is no existing booking so far. It would just continue with the normal progress, basically checking the availability, whether or not the calendar is available, and then running until here in the normal booking flow. If it's not available, nothing new, it just goes back, tells the tool response the alternatives. And if it is available, we then go right over here where we do a couple of more things. Obviously, we're going to book the appointment in that we already verified right here, right? Which was the initial step. We're just going to book the appointment. But now we also do something else. We do an upsert into our database. An upsert is nothing else than either create a user in the database, so insert, or we update it, which is then basically update in the database, right, of that user. And we do that with a couple of details that you can see down here. In case we would create the user, so in case it doesn't even exist in the database based on the phone number, we would add a new row, we would add the phone number, would obviously add the first name if we have that already from within the conversation. Let's, for example, say you ask inside of the conversation the user for their first name. You can basically even send it through. Then we obviously also want to add the appointment timestamp that we add to this appointment timestamp table right here, or this column. And in that case, you need to make sure that it's always in the same time zone. So you don't want to have different time zone in this appointment timestamp. You want to keep it general so you can branch it out later on depending on your needs. So what I suggest is what you also see right here inside of this table. You can see that we save it with a Z at the end, which stands for Zulu. So this is basically UTC time zone that we save the timestamps in, right? Those timestamps we can reuse wherever else, and we can just branch out to different time zones from a generalized setup like that inside of a table. And lastly, we obviously want to set the booking status to active, because that user literally just made a booking, right? So we can set it to active, and based on the appointment timestamp, since it's probably going to be in the future, which I assume and hope so, and the booking status being set to active, it is updated properly in the database. And lastly, let's assume the user is already existent and we just want to update it. We obviously don't need to update every single field again. We just limit ourselves to the most important ones that are actually relevant, which is the timestamp of the appointment booking and obviously the status. So in case there was already previously some information and that was cancelled, you can, for example, just update the appointment timestamp and you can update the booking status, and everything should just work out fine. Now, once we have updated or upserted the data for the user, we do the same thing over here. We just prepare a new response that we send back to the user, where you just say the appointment has been successfully booked. Again, you can just enrich the sentence by adding the actual booking time to it so that it can be confirmed to the user. And then we just send all of this tool call response back to Vapi so that Vapi can use it during the phone call inside of the LLM layer to give a proper response to the caller. Now, as you can see, this whole solution is already a lot bigger than the initial one where we just took care of the booking setup, but it gets a little bit more complex. But stay with me, I'm gonna try to make it as simple as possible, and I've colored it properly, so hopefully you have an easy way of understanding what else has changed. So now, since we have been able to actually make the cancellation properly and also manage the new cancellations or new appointment bookings inside of the user database that we have added, that might be something you can create on Airtable or on Google Sheets, and you can just set that up wherever, maybe even in your very own database if you have a custom one, and you can manage all of those information from there, meaning new appointment bookings, you can create the users in there, and the same thing for cancellations. Now, with that in mind, we now have a, let's say, complete cancellation solution, even though it can be better, where we come again to the point that I mentioned earlier in the beginning, which is giving the user a better confirmation that the appointment actually has been booked. Because as you remember in my previous video, I mentioned something that the AI in some cases still hallucinates and thinks it has booked an appointment even though it hasn't, because in the backend might be some error, you didn't handle it properly, or you sent back a wrong response, which all can be cases where AI still has the potential of hallucinate and say, yep, your appointment has been booked, even though it hasn't. So sending out a confirmation via email or SMS is a very, very crucial thing. And this brings us here to solution number 9, which has only 2 more modules, but it has a couple of more, let's say, actions that are connected on the side of it. And before diving in the graph or the diagram, let's look in the solution considerations. The goal here is that we can send confirmations via email and SMS and send cancellations. And as a feature itself, the goal is basically to inform the caller about whether or not a booking has been canceled or booked in the first place. And obviously, as you can imagine, we have one booking tool and we have one cancellation tool. So in total, we have 2 nodes that kind of do the exact same thing. So let's maybe start with the booking one. Everything is kind of normal until over here when we actually do the calendar booking, which is mean booking an appointment. Once that has been done, We can basically then do two things. We can first of all send a confirmation SMS to that user containing the date that they actually booked in their time zone, obviously. So you need to do some time zone conversion again from whatever you validate based on the UTC time zone of the timestamp that you save inside of your database. And then you can send the SMS to the user, say, hey, here's your booking. This is the date and time. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. Boom, they have a confirmation and know that this meeting is happening there. And secondly, there is another thing with the email, which obviously would be kind of the same setup for SMS. The only difference is you need to collect the email in the first place. Now, I've heard that many times that people or even like clients that come to us have the request of having emails validated through Voice AI. And I cannot emphasize enough to just not do that via a simple phone call, because it will just not work out as well as you might expect it. Because there are so many nuances, especially if it comes to N and M, that are often misunderstood on the phone and cause massive troubles with actually having valid email addresses at the end of the call, even in transcripts. So it's very hard for AI to understand and represent email addresses so far, which is why I'm not a big fan of doing that through the phone call. So in order for you to have an actual email, you should have that information either from a previous form where you collected already information from the user. That gets important if you connect, for example, to a user database where you can actually fetch that information, which would also be the same case here. So we basically get the user email from the user database, whatever that looks like. If you have a unique identifier, or let's say the phone number in a different user database, that might be something that you have in the company, in your CRM, where you also have user information, you can basically query by the phone number and get whatever user you get back, and can take the email address from that user and just send that email to this email address that you fetched. This is an alternative that I always prefer, but let's assume in no case you have the email at all. You can even create a separate scenario that allows you to send a link to the user where they can update their email address. And as you can guess, you can send the link via an SMS. So whenever you send the booking confirmation, you can add something at the end of the email, or at the end of the SMS, that says like, if you'd like to get email notifications about your appointment, please click here to add your email address to it. And the user can click on it, can add their email to it, and then you have basically a separate workflow that can update the email address based on the phone number, again inside of the table or the CRM, wherever you fetch that email address from. Now, it sounds still like a very complex process if it comes to email, but unfortunately, there's not an easy way through Voice AI to collect the email address during a call. So that is why I'm still a big fan of just using a workaround, using the SMS, for example, to create a custom landing page where they can type in the email address. Or if you already use a predefined service that allows you to add an email address visually, you can just send a link from that service within the same SMS. Now, there's not much difference to the other one down here. We have the exact same setup. We would basically, on a cancellation, once it's processed, we would then again check from whether or not there's an email given. We send out the email and we send out the confirmation SMS. And with that said, you can now see a more complete solution that again gives the user a bit more info on input on what actually happens behind the scenes. And I've been talking now for quite some time, and that alone only about these two features that we call cancellation and confirmations, right? And I'd really like to understand at the beginning of this video if you imagined it to be a solution that looks something like this, or if you imagine something completely different. Feel free to drop it below in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. I'm definitely going to read all of them, because that is something that I'm personally just really interested. And just to put this thing in perspective, because right now it looks very complex, I created a bit more of a visual representation that you see right here, where we have separated it by colors based on the flows. So green is the appointment booking and blue is the appointment cancellation tool. So it's easier for you to understand which parts are based on what, even though some of them obviously overlap, like here creating the user in the user database. That is kind of shared anyways between all of those basically between the whole assistant, right? But this hopefully gives you a better representation of the features that we built so far, meaning that we added some more validation over here in the actual booking tool, as well as we created a new cancellation tool that can handle cancellations in the first place. Now, if you like this graph, you will get access to it completely for free inside of my resource hub under hub.integraticus.com. Simply head over there, you can create a free account. You can see all of the tutorials and templates for anything that I've previously created on my YouTube channel as well, so you can leverage it and just make more with your voice agents. And lastly, I would like to emphasize again that it is incredibly crucial for anyone to understand the actual complexity that goes into a booking solution with a voice agent compared to what we always see with other businesses that want to work with us, because there's always this uninformed optimism that causes big issues, especially when you go into the project and you want to build a more sophisticated approach. I can tell you, if you're an agency owner or a business owner, it is always possible to build something cheaper like I mentioned, we started over with a solution that looks like this, right? And we ended up with a solution that looks like this. So again, it is always a question of your budget and how much money you want to spend on something as sophisticated as this, because obviously you can start implementing only some of those features to maybe a very basic version to something as complex as what you see on the screen. And maybe even more complex, which we come to in a future video. But this hopefully gives you a better understanding that it is not as simple as just making an appointment booking. There's a lot more that goes into it, and having that in front of you helps you as well to make a better decision whether or not it is worth building something out for you that supports those kind of features or not. In a lot of cases, I can tell you from our experience that a complete solution like this is not necessary for all of the cases. A lot of people would like to just qualify leads, for example, and even though there might be also some people that actually want to reschedule or cancel, it is a massive minority, so the majority obviously wants to book appointments and not cancel them. So if you say this project might be too big of a budget for you to handle, or maybe even for your client to handle, don't worry, you can always break that down to whatever is necessary for them, while still bringing an exceptionally good product, because those special cases can often be handled by another employee that anyways goes over the transcripts and the call outcomes, so the KPIs that you track, so that you can still have someone just look over and see, aha, there was just like a case where the user actually wanted to book something. I wanted to rebook, but he couldn't because obviously we don't have that feature. And then they can still manually do that. We have seen that with some clients that don't want to invest in that. In the end, it is not an optimal solution. They know that. We know that, but it is often a question of the budget. So keep that in mind while building those solutions or while offering those solutions, because that is very, very crucial. Now, before wrapping up this video, I would like to show you one more thing, which obviously brings us again to solution 10, which is the black box like we have seen it previously. And I have added a couple of more things to it so we can address them in future videos, and I need your feedback to know what you would like to see based on those, because they will help me understand what you actually crave for, what you actually have issues with in your agency. So feel free to go with me over them and decide at the end of the video whether or not you want to see any of those in the future videos, and I'll create one on those. Now, I have already marked those as black because we took care now of cancellation and SMS and email confirmations. It's a very simple setup. Obviously, SMS also depends on your provider, by the way. If you use Twilio, very easy. You have even in make.com a predefined integration that allows you to send SMS through make.com using Twilio. But obviously, it always depends on the service that you use. But for us, I would consider that done, because sending SMS is nothing else than connecting a module to something or just doing a single action, because it's literally just an API endpoint. Now, we still have on the list the most complex part of all, which is probably multi-agent calendars, because even with this setup, what we've seen here, creating a multi-agent calendar, you can imagine, is going to be massive, because what you would need to do is you would need to track out the user IDs and the calendar IDs. You would need to match them in between, and not just here, but also in the database and in between the bookings itself, because in case an agent is booked already, you need to run through again, you need to track the state, which agent you actually checked previously, so you can make a new booking. So this is an incredibly complex topic, which is why I still have it on the list here. And for that alone, we probably need to create a couple of videos, because this is going to be a massive, massive thing, which goes along with round robin anyways. So the rest here, by the way, is kind of like the same. We have everything until email validations. This is what we have previously already. And those 4 points down here are the new ones, which we're gonna go over now. So rescheduling, as you can imagine, let's say a caller comes in, wants to reschedule an appointment, which we have seen here. I want to reschedule an appointment. What needs to happen? You again need to track the state, which we have now already built inside of the cancellation solution. So we can just build on top of that and introduce a couple of more states and do some more validation that kind of needs together with the booking appointment setup. But we'll show you more of that in the future. And this here is another one that I have just kind of neglected so far, which is multiple bookings. As you have seen, my previous example focuses on having a single booking, but there might be the potential that there are multiple bookings for a calendar. And to give you a precise example, in case you cannot imagine, let's say, for example, you are a real estate agency and you sell apartments to people, and people can sign up for multiple viewings for different properties. So they can call and say, I'd like to schedule a meeting for property A on Monday at 3 p.m. And then they can do the same thing again on Monday at 4 p.m. for a different property. So in some cases, it is actually relevant that you store multiple appointments, which you also somehow need to manage out, which again just like makes this whole setup a little more complex. Then we also have booking follow-ups, which is also considered a separate feature, meaning that if someone, for example, booked an appointment, you want to make sure that you can follow up with them, right? Or if the person has not booked an appointment but was interested in it, that you can also track that as a KPI, and you can send them reminders. They say, ah, yeah, you haven't booked an appointment, but you called with us a couple of days ago. Are you still interested in that? You might can do that with SMS. You might can do that with phone calls. You might can do that with email. That's all up to you. There's a whole nurturing sequence that can be built on top of that to just make this whole solution even more sophisticated and just get the show rates as well a lot higher. And lastly, I have another one down here, which is error handling, because as you can imagine, with all of those solutions, we are combining tons of different tools together to act as one, to act like a unified system. And every single system obviously has to be live and up to date and available in the first place. So imagine the calendar breaks. What happens then? The whole flow kind of breaks, stuff will not work. How do you track those errors, etc.? There are a lot of things that you can do for error handling, and this is a whole nother task that even for this scenario alone, we will probably completely overload that and probably bring it to like 4 times the size just with error handling alone. So error handling itself needs to be treated also very carefully, especially if you run on a high volume and you rely on voice AI to work properly. And yeah, with that out of the way, now we're at solution 10, and it seems like we even have more tasks to do than with solution 6 alone, which again brings us to the informed pessimism. There are more and more things that we discover that we need to add to a solution to make it even better. I know that's a lot of information. You will get all of the downloads inside of my resource hub, so take your time, go over them if you want to, get a better understanding of what actually happens behind the scenes, because I can promise you, if you implement those solutions for yourself or your clients, it is crucial to understand it. I cannot emphasize that enough. That's all I have to say so far. Thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate your time and appreciate you standing until the end. And if you have any questions, please drop them down below in the comments, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye bye.